Hey, thank you so much for watching and listening. Of course, I want you to subscribe because we have an amazing channel, amazing content here that helps you, really connects you with God and gives you some really cool ways to see God working in your life when maybe you haven't seen Him do stuff in the past. So we're continuing our series on being disappointed with Jesus. And you're like, that doesn't sound very appealing. On the other side, I think it's also something very real. Because I've done this Christian thing for the entirety of my life. There was a season there when I questioned Jesus as the Son of God and came back around. But for sure, I am deeply in love with Jesus and have been from as long as I can remember. Jesus has always had a very strong appeal for me, irresistible, genuine Jesus. And I think as we read through this, do this series, and we're reading in John chapter 11, it very much speaks to our relationship with Jesus when Jesus doesn't do what we want in the timing that we want and how we want Him to do something. And then He doesn't, quote, meet our expectations. And that's what happened in John chapter 11 because Martha and Mary, the sisters to Lazarus, had sent a message to Jesus in a distant village, hey, the one you love, their brother Lazarus, he's sick. And in essence, they're saying, come and heal him. And Jesus, we kind of learned about walking through this, Jesus waited, He delayed on purpose till Lazarus was super dead. And Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days when He finally shows up at Bethany. And, you know, at Bethany, there's all these Jews who had come from Jerusalem to help mourn, help Martha and Mary mourn and process that grief. And this is a huge, huge loss, massive loss for these sisters. Martha pops out to Jesus when Jesus gets in the vicinity and says to Him, has an interesting conversation. And Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And Jesus, over the course of the conversation, says, I am the resurrection and the life, and your brother will rise again. And I don't think Martha had in mind resurrection. She wanted healing, but I don't think resurrection had kind of entered her thinking or possibilities. I think that was like, what? That's like really a foreign idea. Maybe. She knew resurrection because it was in the last days, so way in the future, eternity. But now, in this moment, I don't think that had crossed her radar. And it's interesting because after a conversation with Jesus, she goes back to her home and she finds her sister Mary, who's back sitting in the house with all of the Jews who are grieving and weeping and there to console and comfort and be present in this loss. Martha says to Mary quietly, the teacher is here and asking for you. I like that Martha refers to Jesus as the teacher, because if you remember, that's the first way we see Mary interacting with Jesus in Luke chapter 10. Mary was a student sitting at Jesus' feet as Jesus was teaching. And so when Martha refers to Jesus as the teacher, I think it's kind of a reference back to that initial experience Mary had with Jesus. And right when Martha says to her, the teacher is here and asking for you, Mary jumps up and she runs out the door. And the Jews who are there as well, they think she's running to the tomb to go weep over the loss of Lazarus. So they go with her. And it says in verse 32, when Mary saw Jesus, she fell at His feet. Remember, first time she was at His feet, she was in learner mode. And now, falling at His feet, she's in mourner mode. She's grieving, and she's feeling the depth of that loss. And she says exactly the same thing that Martha said. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And from there, there's this immense outpouring of grief and wailing. And it says this, I think it's really important for you to think about this, because when Jesus saw her and the Jews with her weeping and mourning, and this word in weeping in the Greek is a heavy wailing. It's loud, it's very, very vocal, and you can feel it, and it's just grief that's just expressed, all kinds of ways. It's tears, it's snotty, runny nose, it's that wailing and just travailing and the loss, and it's, just messy, messy, messy grieving. And when Jesus saw Mary, as well as all the Jews with her, grieving in this way with such despondency. It's interesting what it says. Jesus was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled when he saw them. And I think in some respects, he's having his own, this is a conversation as well with Mary. Jesus had a conversation with Martha, and it was using words. But with Mary, it's a conversation as well, but using emotions. Because as you see this, Jesus says, where have you laid him? And they took him to show him the tomb, and it says that Jesus wept. Jesus participated. He was moved. He saw their emotions and their struggle and their despondency, grief, and wailing, and it moved him. He felt it as well. So Jesus has a conversation with Mary, and it's not necessarily using words, but it's over the context of emotions. I think that's really important for a lot of us, because some of us are wired up to be highly emotional. Like that's our first reaction, is processing is through our emotions. We're we feel deeply and big, intensely. And that in our feelings, we can have conversations with Jesus, and Jesus can participate. He feels, he weeps, he experiences. He's on that page. In that context, we can have conversations with Jesus over the context and with our emotions. And maybe you're watching, listening, and you're like, well, I'm not that emotional type person. I'm more like Martha. I'm a little bit more logical, rational. I use words in my conversation, dialogue. And so maybe that's kind of where you tend to gravitate more. But my point in this is each of us are fearfully and wonderfully made. One isn't better than the other, and one isn't more superior than the other. They're equally valid. And Jesus participates in each kind of conversation equally, because Jesus made you fearfully, wonderfully made, and participates and joins you in the context of how you are made wonderfully, fearfully. So rather than Mary trying to be Martha, oh, I need to be more logical, and some of us have said that. Oh, I wish I was more like so-and-so, or I wish I wasn't so much like me. But I think when we do that, we don't appreciate, we don't value the design that God put in us, and say, I am made by my Creator, and fearfully, wonderfully made, and he loves me. He loves me deeply, and he connects with me in the way that I'm designed on the inside. Jesus did that with Mary, and he also did that with Martha. And so I just encourage you today that in the midst of being disappointed with Jesus, not liking what's happening, just appreciate that you can have real, honest, authentic conversations with Jesus, however you're designed. And Jesus steps into those conversations to connect, participate, and engage with you, and walk with you, and be present with you in that conversation, in that disappointment, in that frustration. And you can pour out your heart to him, whatever that looks like, words or emotions, and none of it repels Jesus. He doesn't get anxious or like, now what do I do? Humans get jittery, for sure. But Jesus, I like that Jesus is anti-jittery. That's pretty good, huh? So thank you so much for subscribing. Of course, I want you to hit the notification bell right there. That keeps you posted when we put up new content. Of course, it'd be great if you'd share this with some friends and family, coworkers, maybe students in your class, because I think we all have opportunities, experiences where we have been or will be, can be disappointed with Jesus. And here's a question for you to think about. As we're entering into fall, right? It's fall and we're kind of having the leaves turn colors and all that stuff. What's your favorite thing about the fall season? What do you like most? I know some people are like, pumpkin chai lattes and all of that, but what do you like best about the fall? And so here is your finishing joke, which, we all love these jokes. A lot of you are like, whoop, we're done. But here's your joke. I was confused when my printer started playing music. I have a printer at home, and then I realized the paper was jamming. So stupid. I agree, but of course next week will be way better.